What's up, everybody? So today I have something very special for you, and this is a speech made by Mr. Morrison, I believe in 1952 at the old Lincoln Days gathering in Lincoln, New Mexico. So you're going to hear the speech. I'm going to just read it. It's about 16 pages, typewritten, 8.5 by 11. And this would have been before the publication of Alias Billy the Kid. So Brushy had been dead for, I guess, a couple of years. But I think what this speech shows you is just the spirit of this man, the kindness of this man, the gentleness of this man, and the good heart of this man. So he was a father, a grandfather. He was a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I love the unity in this speech that he gives to the relatives of people that had fought in the Lincoln County War. And so there's not a more controversial place to say, hey, Pat Garrett never killed Billy the Kid than in Lincoln, New Mexico, I think in 1952, with relatives of people. And what's really interesting to me that stands out is that at the time Morrison came forward, no one had ever challenged the official narrative. And so everybody just assumed that, yeah, all the records are there. I mean, we heard this before in one of my other videos where Poe Garrett says, I'm quoting the authorities in the record. And then the newspaper in El Paso says, all the documents were properly filed. They never checked. Nobody actually ever checked this. So it's something that, nobody really cared about. Billy the Kid was a single lone dude at this point with no really friends in the legislature or anything like that. So he got out of Dodge and they could say really anything they wanted to say. And without being challenged, it continued for 70 years. And then Brushy came out and said, hey, I'm not dead. I'm actually Billy the Kid. And then that kicked in Mr. Morrison. So for somebody to start with nothing, the way he did, I mean, this man, the courage of this man and the integrity of this man and the commitment of this man to defend his client is just super, super admirable, in my opinion. So I'm honored to share this with you. I think this man is a great man. If you notice, everything I do of any significance, I dedicate to Mr. Morrison, and I dedicate this video to him too. So I hope you like the speech. To all of you good people, I would like to say that I'm happy to be with you today. This is the third annual celebration that I have attended since coming to this country in August of 1949 on a special assignment. I hope to be able to attend many more of these fine meetings. Never before have I seen such a nice gathering of people in any place. The subject upon which I'm about to speak is highly controversial. I hope that you will receive it with the spirit in which it is given. Although I have talked with old-timers who fought in the Lincoln County War, I am not qualified to speak about it, except insofar as it pertains to Billy the Kid. However, one cannot talk about the kid without touching upon the war. Billy fought on the side of McSween. Many of his friends fought on the other side. It seems like the McSween side has been written up, but the Murphy side has been neglected. I have talked to people from both sides, and I do not believe that any certain person was responsible for the war, but it was fought just the same, regardless of who may have been responsible. After this war was over, these people reunited, and together they built a great country. Here in Lincoln County, they forgot about their differences. They immediately set about to build a great community. This gathering of fine people is evidence of such. We hold malice towards no one. We are all friends again. I think all of you people should be proud of your relatives who fought in there. They made this country a safe place for you and me to enjoy today. The subject upon which I wish to speak to you is, he said he was Billy the Kid. And he had the proof with him. Probably there are people here who will take exception. I wish to say, it is not my intention to hurt your feelings, to cause any unrest among you, or to attack the private acts of anyone. I criticize the official and quasi-official acts of the people involved. It is not my intention to quote the law on the propositions. I simply state the facts and the law as I think they should be. You must arrive at your own conclusions on this matter. I am impartial in the whole matter, but I set out to do a job to the best of my ability, and I believe that I have done it insofar as it was possible to do. I attempted to gain freedom for a man who said he was Billy the Kid, and he was still under sentence to hang for a murder committed during the Lincoln County War. Yes, some of you are probably thinking that I am off the beam, that Pat Garrett killed Billy the Kid on that certain July 14th, 1881, like his purported coroner verdict said. Or you say you think he was killed in that certain month of August 1881, like the Legislative Act said he was killed. To all of this thinking, I am forced to take exception. I will dispose of the coroner verdict and the Legislative Act later on. I know that Garrett never killed the kid on that certain July 14th, nor in that certain month of August, nor at any other time. Billy the Kid was never killed by anyone. You're probably wondering how I know all of this. Well, it would have taken a long time to tell all about my research, but I'm going to tell you about some of it. It began in Florida in 1949, where I met an old gentleman who said he knew that Billy the Kid was not killed by Pat Garrett or anyone else. He told me many things about the kid and how I would be able to identify the kid if I ever found him. He told me how he had fought against the kid in the Lincoln County War. Soon thereafter, I located this man who I thought should be Billy the Kid. I visited with him and his wife in their home. His wife did not know that he was Billy the Kid. She knew nothing about it. This man and I talked in confidence for many hours. During this conference, he confessed that he actually was Billy the Kid, New Mexican outlaw, and he begged for help in getting a pardon. I told him that if he could prove to me that he was actually Billy the Kid, that I would help him. And so he told me his story. He showed me the bullet wound scars on his body and told me about the time and place where he got each of them. I examined him thoroughly and questioned him rigorously until I was firmly convinced that he was Billy the Kid as claimed. There he stood before me, as straight as the Indian from whom he descended, a small, well-built man, standing 5 feet 8 inches and weighing 160 pounds, with small feet, small, well-shaped hands with large wrists, over which I saw him remove handcuffs. His dancing blue eyes were piercing through me. His eyesight and hearing were still excellent. However, he did not read or write for more than 30 years. His mind was firm. He talked distinctly with a high-pitched voice, speaking Spanish as well as 3 Indian dialects. He laughed as he talked, and he always seemed to be in a happy mood. Of course, some of the incidents he talked about were not happy ones, and he wept as he talked about these incidents. He started his story with his trial in Mesilla, where he was sentenced to hang on April the 13th, 1881. He thought he got a raw deal in court, and I believe that he did. He thought that Governor Wallace should have pardoned him like he agreed to do. He thought that the present governor of New Mexico should carry out this original agreement that he had with Governor Wallace in 1879. And now he wanted this long-awaited pardon as promised. He was willing to do anything to get it, especially so since he knew he did not have long yet to live. I told him about the complications that it might create, that some of Garrett's people may still be living, but it didn't bother him. He was now ready to go into court and prove that Garrett didn't kill Billy the Kid. He related his whole life to me, and I made notes while checking through some of his old notebooks. Then I arranged for the attorney in the office in Beaumont, Texas, to talk to Billy. But he must come alone. Billy was still dubious. He was still running. He was not so certain that he should trust anyone. He did not want to kill anyone anymore, but he also did not want to go back to jail. He was now known as Billy Roberts, and Brushy Bill, the old scout. Mr. Roberts, the attorney in Beaumont, was a member of this old Roberts family. He made the trip. He talked to Billy and decided that we should try to obtain a pardon for Billy. I was assigned to check all the records and indictments in the matter, and to get a certified copy of the coroner verdict in San Miguel County, New Mexico, in order to prepare a lawsuit to have the judgment set aside. I went to Billy's home in Texas, where I picked him up for the long journey through New Mexico to get these records. We arrived in Lincoln in August of 1949, where we talked to a few people. We did not tell them that Billy the Kid was still alive. After checking the records in Carrizozo, we stopped in Lincoln and went through the old courthouse. It was in here that he explained how he actually killed the 2 guards and escaped from this death house. He wept as he told the story while we were in there alone. Right here is where I really began to understand the whole situation. After I failed to obtain a certified copy of Garrett's coroner's verdict, I made a personal search through many counties in New Mexico, but it could not be located. I discovered that no official coroner verdict had ever been made in the purported death of the kid. At no place in the whole state could a legal death record be found. Consequently, this claimant could not get into court to tell his story like he wanted to. He therefore filed a petition for pardon on November 15, 1950, with Governor Thomas J. Mabry in Santa Fe. The governor requested a meeting with the petitioner before he would consider the pardon. We agreed to produce him if the meeting could be private, except the appearance of historians, to which the governor agreed. We made the trip to Albuquerque only to find that our private meeting would be open to the public. Upon arriving in Santa Fe, I called the governor by telephone to protest. He apologized for the release to the press, but he agreed to grant a private hearing if we would come to the mansion early by the back way. We did as directed by the governor. As we approached the rear yard, we noticed many people standing around in both yards of the mansion. We entered to the back door and were met by the governor, who took us into another room. In here, we saw people standing around near the walls. I realized that the cards were stacked. I suggested that we stop the show and return to our home, but Billy was not backing down now. Shortly thereafter, the show began. We filed into the large room, and the governor introduced the two sons of Pat Garrett, who was supposed to have killed Billy the Kid on July 14th or in August of 1881. Whichever date you have been told. The governor introduced Mr. Cliff McKinney, son of Kip McKinney, who was there with Garrett on that certain July 14th, or that certain month of August. Mr. Cliff McKinney asked Billy some questions. Then Oscar Garrett asked a question. The governor asked Billy if he had been to Carlsbad, to which the answer was about 6 months ago. Then the governor introduced the sheriff from Carlsbad, inquiring if Billy had seen this man when he was in Carlsbad. Billy said that he had not. Then Billy looked over and noticed an armed policeman standing on each side of the door through which we had entered that room. He was so frightened, he could not remember who he had seen in Carlsbad or any place else. He told me later that he could not even remember the name of his own wife after seeing that sheriff and the two armed guards in that room. He knew if the state policeman did not arrest him, that the sheriff from Carlsbad would arrest him for going through that county about 6 months ago, but there was nothing he could do now. He was once again helpless in New Mexico, or so he thought. The show went on. Mr. Will Robinson, a historian, started his memory test on Billy. Billy could not remember anything about the incident so distinctly recalled by Mr. Robinson. But the table turned. Billy asked Mr. Robinson a question. Mr. Robinson admitted in the presence of everyone that his memory was a bit hazy too after so many years. And Mr. Robinson was considerably younger than Billy, but he couldn't pass his own memory test, which he had started. Billy failed their famous memory test, but he still had the evidence that Garrett didn't kill him. There he sat, waving his small hands as he talked, the large wrists bulging below his sleeves, those famous wrists that so often gave him freedom from handcuffs while he was confined with leg irons in the old days. His shifty, keen eyes were piercing through everyone, but no one in that room noticed anything about him. Wasn't there anyone in that room who had ever heard about these peculiar characteristics? Small feet, small hands with the famous bulging wrists and foxy eyes? They'd apparently heard about everything else. No, not one person in that room asked to see any evidence or any records. Why not? They were interested in answers to foolish questions, none of which could have proved anything conclusively. Anybody who had read the stories in the books could have given the answers as they expected them. Later on, I learned that not one person in the room ever knew Billy the Kid. Where were the old-timers that claimed they had seen the body buried in Fort Sumner? None of them were there to tell their story. I wonder why not. Maybe they were afraid to subject themselves to a memory test. Maybe their stories would not stand investigation. There was not one single person in that room who could have testified in court on any of the issues involved, except for Billy Roberts. And he never had a chance to testify in court. I wonder if anyone wanted to hear his testimony. Yes, no one but Billy Roberts could have furnished the evidence which he was ready to display upon proper inquiry, and the evidence that would have amply proved his claim. Billy told them that he was born in Buffalo Gap, Texas on December the 31st, 1859. They thought Billy the Kid was born in New York, but they did not know that there was no proof or evidence in any form to support their contention. Their contentions have never been disputed until now. Billy Roberts died on December 27, 1950, in Texas, before he had a chance to appeal to the incoming Governor Meacham. He did not have a chance to complete his mission. Since he is no longer among us, he cannot tell you about the things on his mind, more or less all of the things in his lifetime. And I am not qualified to tell his story. But I will attempt to tell you a few of the things that he wanted told. Some of you may think I am partial to the old gentleman. Maybe so. But first, listen to the facts as I have learned them. The kid came to this country in the fall of 1877. For a short period of time, he worked on the Chisholm Ranch, and he worked for the Maxwells. He spent the winter with a friend on the Ruidoso. Next, he joined his old friend Jesse Evans, with whom he had roamed the streets in Silver City in the early days. Evans was now the head of a bunch at Murphy's Camp in the Seven Rivers country, but Evans was not his name in Texas. Neither was Bonnie, the kid's name. They rustled cattle from the Chisholm herds. Then the kid fell out with these friends over the division of profits from these raids. The kid jumped on his little roan and started back to Coe's place on the Ruidoso. He stopped at Tunstall's ranch on the Feliz at noontime. They invited him to eat with them. It was here that Tunstall hired the kid to ride herd with some of his old friends from Chisholm's ranch. Shortly thereafter, Tunstall was killed by a posse of Sheriff William Brady while on the way to Lincoln to surrender his herd of horses to the sheriff. I believe that this murder of Tunstall brought the war into the open. Things kept getting worse. Sides were well marked. There was no neutral place. So they had a conflict. Unfortunately, not everyone could be on the same side. Many people were killed. Many were driven from their homes and forced to build in other lands. Billy went from bad to worse. He had been a leader of the McSween force after the others had been killed. He had gone too far. There was no pulling out now, or so he thought. Consequently, he was branded an outlaw. Still, he thought he had a right to live somehow, and he was going to see to it that he did live. His depredations widened into the panhandle of Texas. Then the large cattlemen put a sheriff in office who ran Billy the Kid out of the country, but they did not put him into the grave in old Fort Sumner like they had told it. In fact, they never did kill Billy the Kid. Some of you are probably familiar with the two purported coroner's verdicts. A copy of one was submitted by Garrett's attorney in his unsuccessful attempt to collect the reward money offered by Governor Wallace. Neither verdict was ever officially made. The governor failed to recognize Garrett's copy in 1881, and the legislature refused to recognize it in 1882. The legislature did not recognize any coroner verdict. The act of the legislature says that Garrett killed William H. Bonney in the month of August 1881. But history does not recognize this date. Why not? Have you ever been told this before? You may say that records were not properly and adequately kept in those days. Well, maybe records were not properly and adequately kept in that day. But let us just see what Mr. Green, Garrett's lawyer, did in his attempt to collect the reward for killing Billy the Kid. Mr. Green was editor of the Santa Fe, New Mexican newspaper. He was the official publisher of the territorial documents. He was a friend of Tom Catrone, who was head of the Santa Fe Ring in power at that time. Catrone was a member of the Murphy faction who fought against Billy the Kid. Catrone's law partner, Mr. Thornton, was a member of the legislature that passed the Act for Green. But why did Garrett's lawyer have to go before the legislature to get relief for killing the kid? I believe that I know the reason. They could not produce an official coroner verdict in the purported death of the kid. The governor would not recognize the copy they had included in their report, and therefore the governor turned down their claim for the money offered by Governor Wallace. They had no legal claim, but what did they do? They asked the legislature to do what the governor could not do. The legislature passed a private act granting relief, but it cost much more and it required much more time than a certified copy of an official verdict would have cost in the matter. If there had been an official verdict of that day, which there was not, and there is not any today, proof of which I have, I'll bet the Santa Fe Ring never did pass up anything. I'll bet they would have produced a certified copy of the record if it had been there. And I'll bet that Garrett's lawyer would have seen to it that the record would have been properly kept if it had ever been properly made. Furthermore, I'll bet that if they did collect any money, it did not pay the expenses of the venture. I could not find an authority anyplace where the legislature had power to declare judgments. I believe that this judicial power was vested in the courts, which were functioning in the territory of New Mexico at the time Billy the Kid was supposed to have been killed. Therefore, you can understand why I believe the legislative act could not possibly have legally declared Mr. William H. Bonney as being dead. I will admit that there's no one left to testify anything that may have taken place that July night in Fort Sumner since the death of Billy Roberts in 1950. Garrett did not leave any legal evidence to support his contention that Billy the Kid was killed then or at any other time. Billy the Kid was not dead in 1881, but he did leave the country. He built a home in a new land, the same as some of the other people from Lincoln County did in those days. Then he came back to this country to reestablish himself, the same as some of the others did at that time. But the governor took no action on his pardon, and he went back to Texas. Those people came back here after the disturbance and made good. They had the courage to carry on among their former neighbors. That is the evidence of cooperation to the fullest extent. And that is the reason all of us are here today, to enjoy a day in Old Lincoln. I thank each and every one of you for your kind attention. William V. Morrison.